This is Wrongway Corrigan and Fix America, episode 48, entitled When Truth Exists as Theory. The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us, even in the room in which you sit. You can see it when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. Allow me to show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. The 3 books cited in this essay together constitute a catalog of cabal techniques. This time there are so many quotations that I must dispense with calling out quotation marks, and I will speak their sentences as though they were my own. A new term has crept into the language. It is post-truth, and it arrives 2,000 years late. The Wikipedia article is 26 pages long. The article, all by itself, is post-truth. It is an artificial argument of suspicious length. It overwhelms with dozens of sides for an issue that has only 2 sides. And the 2 sides are these. Side number 1. The truth moves power from the criminal to the citizen. Therefore, it does not matter to the cabal what citizens believe as long as it is false. Post-truth or pre-truth, any modifier makes it false, just as you do not say post-wet or pre-wet, you say dry. And side number 2, distraction keeps crowds from crime scenes. It does not matter what you see, as long as it is not one of their crimes. 26 pages of article is intended to become exhausting. 26 pages runs out the clock. The Tholian web was complete and the Matrix had us. But that was before Trump. And now millions are awake. The Trumpian destruction of the Matrix is being done one mind at a time, and from the inside out. The wreckage will be called cynicism, a condition where everything must be proven, but no one believes the proof. Cynicism is the ultimate catch-22. When the history of this war is written, it may fairly be said that as long as the cabal was taking it slow, with those time-honored things they did so well, like mass murder and grand larceny, that they were headed for a slow but certain victory. But then they became flashy and impatient, and started cutting loose with gay pride parades and unisex restrooms. Finally, it got so sloppy and so freewheeling that we actually watched Pelosi rip up the State of the Union speech live on primetime TV. And we watched Pelosi describing the wrap-up smear technique live in front of C-SPAN cameras. What is the basic tactical unit of the cabal? It is the family. The family get-together arouses no suspicion, yet it is exclusive. It is low observable. Its insignia is its name. In 1892, the cabal shipped the basic tactical unit of one Jewish family to America including the 1-year-old nephew of Sigmund Freud. His name was Edward L. Bernays. Bernays later added the middle initial on his own, a small but yet elegant lie. Bernays was the godfather of the modern dream world of the Matrix. The overachievers of this particular family would eventually pioneer everything from psychoanalysis to Netflix. After college in an Ivy League school, the job of Sigmund Freud's nephew would be to mainstream the growing narrative of the Matrix. He would modernize it for the new 20th century. By the end of the 19th century, the Matrix had been pretty much unchanged since the days of Napoleon. It was time for an update. Publisher William Randolph Hearst had done a good job, as had all the major compromised newspapers. The cabal does not care what you believe as long as it is false. Like the lie about the Spaniards blowing up our battleship Maine in Havana Harbor, a pretext for 13 years of war. A 9/11 at anchor. Bernays wrote that virtually no important enterprise is carried on without creating pictures in the minds of millions. With language, they construct the lie, but language is slow and leaves behind evidence. With reflex, they simply plant the pictures in your mind, and you construct the lie yourself. But then came rumbles of awakening. Bernays wrote that in 1909, New York City Mayor and Tammany Hall boss William Gaynor said that in the so-called common sense generation of the early 20th century, nobody cares what newspapers say. And 5 years later, Bernays wrote that free-thinking columnist H.L. Mencken wrote in the Atlantic Monthly that an educated man does not take his opinions from newspapers, and that his attitude of newspapers ranges from indifference to contempt. So then, 2 decades after that, just before the stock market crash, what had changed? Because by 1928, Bernays glowingly says that newspapers are part of the invisible government. What had rehabilitated the newspaper? Not only had signs of the times changed, but time itself had changed. In 1870, we worked 65 hours per week. Work is isolating. We isolate even from our own thoughts. During work, we concentrate on the work. The eyes focus on the hands. By 1915, the work week was down to 55 hours. Therefore, 10 more hours each week becomes available for us to think, to discuss, to become critics. Finally, in 1925, Henry Ford began the 40-hour work week, and the national average was down to 50 hours per week. So with all that extra time to think and talk to each other, wouldn't the control problem of the cabal have become worse? It might have, except for one thing. Technology to the rescue. By 1925, there were 500 radio stations, and if we listened to the radio just 2 hours per day, then we were back up to the 1870 number of 65 hours of isolation per week. Work is isolating. Radio is isolating. The voices of radio do not leave room for our thoughts. Our eyes focus on the speaker, on the knobs, on the glow of the dial. Less time left to think and to discuss. Critics need listeners, but the listeners are listening to the radio. An early form of social distancing. My thesis is that in 1925, Henry Ford's actual motivation in making the work week shorter was merely to add more jobs so that the coming crash of the Great Depression would be bigger. It was necessary to crash the human spirit, to wear down our emotional toughness. Planning ahead is what they do by analysis of language-driven concepts. As Bernays says, by 1928, isolated once more, we fell back under the influence of the invisible government of newspapers. But even then, more new technologies were on the way. Bernays knew that a narrative update was needed. It was one thing for Americans to accept lies, but slavery would accelerate if Americans could actually be made eager stooges. And so today we meditate on glowing screens, and we self-isolate in groups of one. We have our notifications. We lose the advantages of community. Our language empties of its concepts. Edward L. Bernays, faithful servant of globalist crime families, each with a hit list, each with a body count, would be kept alive until he reached 103 years of age. Book 1, Propaganda, by Edward L. Bernays, 130 pages, repetitive, hammering each point from several directions. Published in 1928 at a time when, as the book claimed, future developments in radio are uncertain. Radio would become their secret weapon during a time when the shorter work week was causing them to lose control. The book, entitled Propaganda, had 3 assignments for itself: rehabilitate the public image of propaganda, recruit more public relations foot soldiers, and reassure the teeming global psychopaths that wise men are hard at work on behalf of evil men everywhere. Book 2, Criticizing Public Opinion, by Edward L. Bernays, published in 1923. 132 pages, one bland metaphysical generality after another. Irrelevant. Not much I could use, just 2 quotes, but important ones. Book 3. At the end of this essay will be A Culture of Conspiracy, published in 2003, just 2 years after they murdered Bill Cooper. 189 pages. This is an attack on us, but we can use it. It is their secret locker room playbook, but it becomes a playbook only when read in a mirror. This book contains all the tricky plays. The book's subtitle is Apocalyptic Visions in Contemporary America, and thus we remember that Webster says that the word apocalypse comes from the Greek apocalypsis, meaning to uncover hell. Propaganda had gotten a bad name for as long as Americans found the time to analyze it. Americans were catching on. One symptom of increased thinking was that we refused to join the League of Nations. we did not consent. To fix this, Edward L. Bernays rebranded propaganda as public relations and as advertising. His contemporary Walter Lippmann called propaganda the manufacturing of consent, which Lippmann deemed necessary since democracy is impossible in modern mass society whose members are incapable of lucid thought or clear perception. Of course, the rarity of lucid thought and the difficulty of clear perception are precisely what the cabal had been working on and still is working on. Like today, when they have made the schools rotten and then blame you for flunking out. By the 1920s, the excuses for the blood sacrifice of the First World War were wearing thin, but time was running out. Propaganda would soon be needed again in the hands of Joseph Goebbels and his German ministry of public enlightenment. And what would Adolf Hitler and Heinrich Himmler do without advertising raised up to the fever pitch of propaganda? A crash program of lies was needed. Bernays thought of public relations men as a heroic elite of invisible governors. Bernays spoke of invisible governors skilled enough in manipulation to lead public opinion. Bernays spoke of himself mastering the responses of a pliable, receptive population. Such men, he said, were dictators exercising great power, so that the people below them worked as if actuated by the touch of a button. 9/11 was a button, but usually the mass reactions they create are not explosive. Instead, the changes to the public mind are incremental and half-conscious. Bernays knew that propaganda seduces those whom it most horrifies. Seduction is not quick, and even if you hate it, you fall for it. Propaganda, he wrote, is the cost of a smoothly functioning society. Those who manipulate a democratic society are the invisible government of invisible governors. But that government must be compartmentalized. The invisible governors must be unaware of the identity of their fellow members. And Bernays wrote that America is actually dominated by a relatively small number of persons. Beneath this small cabal of conspirators lies the larger political machine. Bernays states that American voters know subconsciously that they need this political machine. Otherwise, they know their votes would produce nothing. Bernays said that American voters know that the invisible government must narrow their choices down to practical limits. Remember, Agent Smith told Morpheus, once we begin doing your thinking for you, it really became our civilization. And now Bernays spies a distant future when he says that as good as propaganda is, it would be even better to simply have committees of wise men who would choose our rulers, dictate our conduct, and decide on the best types of clothes and food. But until that distant day, a reasonable smoothness is achieved when free competition is organized by propaganda. And to achieve this, society has consented. Bernays says society has become complex. The need for invisible government has been demonstrated. Opinion must be regimented. The technical means have been invented. By 1928, Bernays called out the list. The printing press, the newspaper, the railroad, the telephone, the telegraph, the radio, and airplanes. He may not have foreseen TV and computers, but there was one existing technology that was not on Bernays' list of 1928, and that was movies. Why should Bernays omit movies? His book in 1923 included movies. His book in 1928 did not include movies. The reason is because in 1928 they had begun to make talkies. The cabal was not yet comfortable with spoken language that you could play back and analyze again. You can sit through a talkie a second time and listen more closely and realize that you had been hearing only bland metaphysical generalities. Reflex was safer. No residue of evidence. Bernays says that virtually no important enterprise is carried on without creating pictures in the minds of millions. Silent films planted pictures in our minds, and we acted by reflex. Likewise, you could hide lies among the sections on the pages and columns of a newspaper. But there was something unnerving about actually saying the lie out loud. For the cabal, talkies were a training ground. Soon the invisible government would no longer fear giving people language in movies, because afterward those same people would be home, silently staring at the speakers of their radios, and they would be isolated. They had used the written word in newspapers, and now they would use the spoken word in movies. The shorter work week had given people the time to think, and that had temporarily crashed the usefulness of newspapers. But this had been cured by the isolation of radio. Radio shows are isolating. We isolate even from our own thoughts. We concentrate on the speaker, the eyes focus on the dial. But new technologies in future years will bring even more distractions and more complete isolation. Perhaps you have one of these future technologies in your pocket right now. Bernays blamed the Industrial Revolution, blamed public schools, blamed giving the vote to women. Bernays blamed all of this for the passing of economic power to the voters, and for the taking of that economic power away from the elites. Nevertheless, Bernays believed it would be possible to mold the mind of the masses so that they would throw their newly gained strength in the desired direction back toward the elites. Periodically, the elites would steal those wages back with depressions, recessions, bubbles, and crashes. And that worked for 70 years. But eventually it was seen that it would be more efficient to prevent the common people from earning that money in the first place. And so Bush and Obama simply shipped the jobs to Mexico and China. No jobs, no money, no power, and now no problem. Until the day of the escalator. And now, for your coach's playbook, A Culture of Conspiracy. This book was designed to keep people like me from waking up and becoming people like me. It's a snarky series of put-downs straight out of social dominance syndrome. But if you turn some of his sentences around 180 degrees, they point to the truth. But nobody ever reads a book backwards, do they? I do. We, the awakened ones, do. First are Webster's. Intuition, from the Latin intuitio, meaning a quick insight for immediate use. And then insight, the act of seeing into the inner nature of a situation. The cabal has no flash of insight. The cabal has only the slow hunt and peck of language-driven analysis. Intuition is the non-analytical flash recognition practiced by those who connect the dots. Those dots are located in your unconscious archive of picturable ideas. This is how you find your car keys when they become lost. I predict that within a few years, we will all be reading the old books and automatically turning every statement around 180 degrees to see what the book really says. But let's start this now. First is the author's 3 principles of conspiracy theories. Let's reverse each. Number 1. Truthers claim that nothing happens by accident. Reversed. Things in motion are the effects of being set in motion by a cause. Do you ever ask, what happened? Well, you're looking for a cause. Number 2. Truthers claim that nothing is as it seems. Reversed. Do we outlaw false eyelashes and house paint? Should we post reviews below obituaries? Number 3. Truthers claim that patterns prove cause and effect. Reversed. If an effect is known, then a cause is presumed. Patterns emerge all by themselves when causes become no longer random. Now, lifting statements from the book and reversing each. Number 1. The author claims that the 1776 book entitled The Protocol of the Elders of Zion is a famous anti-Semitic forgery. Reversed. Anti-Semitism is a standard shaming technique to stop analysis. Calling it anti-Semitic automatically means that it's not a forgery. Our censors can detect when they raise their shields. Number 2, conspiracy literature tries to mimic conventional scholarship. Reversed. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Number 3. Truthers reduce complex situations to simple causes. Reversed. A cause is best concealed underneath a false complexity. Number 4. Truthers claim that information which refutes a conspiracy theory has been planted by the very same conspirators. Reversed. A second layer of conspiracy is sometimes discovered during the original investigation. Do all conspirators have to stop with a single conspiracy? Number 5. All conspiracy theories become non-falsifiable because every rebuttal is called a trick. Reversed. Since you are investigating a trick, and since a trick is unreal, true evidence cannot exist. And so the cabal uses other tricks to support the original trick. Number 6. Because conspiracy claims can be so broad and powerful, they can gather in all of the authorities, such as the news media, universities, the coroner, and the police, thereby making the testing of the claims impossible because truthers say no honest authorities exist. Reversed. This is why it is called a conspiracy. There must be multiple people working toward a common end. The reason that crimes are always thought to be small is because big crimes are never investigated. Number 7. The falsity of conspiracy theorists is revealed by their inability to explain why they did not fall for the mind control. Reversed. The cabal demands that the theorist explains the workings of his own mind by comparing it to every other mind. This is like saying, if there were 50 people present, how was it that you were the only one to notice? And my favorite, number 8. The conspiracy theorist is called upon to explain the supposed similarity between paranoid delusions and conspiracy theories. Reversed. The paranoid is considered delusional only because the pathology has yet to be observed, and the conspiracy theorist is considered paranoid only because the crime has yet to be charged. Their strength and their speed are based on their world, built on their rules. Because of that, they can never be as fast or as strong as you can be. This has been Wrong Way Corrigan and Fix America, episode 48, entitled When Truth Exists as Theory. If you've come this far, I hope you thought it worth your while. God bless and keep our hero president. Where we go one, we go all. And so long until next time.